At 1:52 on the morning of March 2nd, 2024, Jack O'Sullivan sent a short message to his mother. He told her he would find a taxi or an Uber. She did not need to wait up. Catherine O'Sullivan read the words, felt the ordinary reassurance, and eventually fell asleep. The porch light stayed on. That is what parents do when a son says he is coming home. Jack was 22. He had graduated from the University of Exeter with a degree in history. He was living again under the family roof in Flax Bourton, North Somerset, while he studied a law conversion course at BPP University in Bristol. He was applying for training contracts. He ran most days. Friends called him steady, the one who made plans and kept them. Nothing about the evening suggested it would become the last time anyone would see him. On the evening of 1st March, Jack left the house in Flax Bourton around 8:20. He took the bus into Bristol and met 3 new friends from his law course at a Wetherspoons. The group moved on to a house party in a flat in the Hotwells area. The location sat close to the floating harbor and the Cumberland Basin, the entrance to the city's docks. It was a cold night. Snow had fallen earlier. The pavements were icy. Jack texted his mother at 1:52. He had considered going on to a club, but decided against it. He would get a ride home. At approximately 2:53, he left the party alone. CCTV later showed him on the streets of Hotwells attempting to stop taxis and private hire cars. None of them stopped. He kept walking. At 3:13 to 3:17, cameras recorded Jack walking across a grassy area at the junction of Brunel Lockway and Brunel Way. He was below the Plimsoll Swing Bridge near the Cumberland Basin. He wore a quilted green-brown barber jacket, a beige woolen jumper, navy chinos, and brown leather trainers with white soles. 16 minutes later, at 3:24, he tried to call a friend who was still at the party. The friend called back around 3:30. Jack answered. He said only the word, "hello." The line went dead. Between those moments, a figure matching his description appeared on footage crossing the Plimsoll Bridge, heading back toward the city center. At 3:38 to 3:40, the last clear images placed him on the Bennett Way slip road, on the northern side of the river, walking toward Hotwells and the direction of home. After that, the cameras went quiet. No further confirmed visual of Jack O'Sullivan has ever been released. The phone did not stop. At 5:40, the Find My iPhone function shared with Catherine placed the device at a residential address on Granby Hill, a steep street of Victorian houses running down toward the Cumberland Basin, less than a mile from the last CCTV frame. The phone remained active on the network until 6:44. There was reported data usage in that window. Catherine called the number repeatedly. It rang, then it stopped. When the family realized Jack had not come home, they drove to the Granby Hill address in the early morning light. They rang doorbells. No one had seen him. The electricity substation at the foot of the hill was later checked. Nothing. By the time the official missing person report was made, more than 3 hours had passed since the last image of a young man in a barber jacket walking a slip road in the cold. Avon and Somerset Police began the search on 2nd March itself. Officers reviewed early CCTV. Dive teams and land searchers were mobilized around the floating harbor and the River Avon. The cold weather and the proximity of water shaped the first working assumptions. Jack was described as white, about 5 feet 10 inches tall, of slim build, with short brown hair. Posters and social media appeals went out within hours. The family waited at home, checking the same location data again and again. In those first 48 hours, the investigation stayed close to the last known ground: Brunel Lockway, the Plimsoll Bridge, Bennett Way, Granby Hill. More than 100 hours of CCTV from 31 different sources would eventually be examined. In the beginning, the volume of footage already felt overwhelming. Catherine later said the early hours were a blur of calls and waiting. The ordinary text at 1:52 kept replaying in her mind. A son had said he was coming home. The cameras had watched him walk toward that home. Then the picture ended, and the phone kept its own private timeline for 3 more hours. Within the first week of March 2024, Avon and Somerset Police expanded the physical search far beyond the last CCTV frames. Dive teams worked the harbor and the River Avon from the basin toward known catchment points. Land teams walked the banks. Mounted officers covered ground from the city center out toward Flax Bourton. More than 200 hours of river and bank searching were logged in the early phase. 40 separate land searches followed. Drones flew the area 16 times. Police Air Service and the RNL. I supported the effort. Nothing belonging to Jack was recovered. Officers reviewed footage from 31 sources: council cameras, private businesses, doorbell systems, dash cams. The confirmed last image remained the figure on Bennett Way at approximately 3:38 to 3:40. 2 additional grainy clips, one on the Plimsoll Bridge around 3:25 and the slip road sequence, were later assessed as likely to be him. The phone data sat at the center of the early technical work. The device had stayed on the network until 6:44. A location fix at 5:40 pointed to a specific address on Granby Hill. Police treated the Find My result with caution, noting the known limitations of the algorithm near dense housing and an electricity substation. Still, the address and the surrounding gardens were examined. Catherine and Alan O'Sullivan did not wait passively. Within days, they were on the same streets their son had walked. Ben, Jack's older brother, returned repeatedly to the last known area. The family organized community searches. Crowdfunding began to support specialist search dogs and independent help. By June 2024, the family had been given limited access to retained CCTV that officers had initially set aside as no longer of primary value. Catherine spent hours examining the material at home. She located 2 sequences the initial review had missed, one at approximately 3:17, showing Jack walking away from the river edge, and the later Bennett Way frames. Those discoveries changed the emotional temperature inside the house. The early working theory had leaned toward the water. The newly found images showed a young man moving in the opposite direction. Catherine later said, "The realization that the footage had been in police possession from the beginning was difficult to absorb." The family lodged a formal complaint about the handling of the early inquiry. Avon and Somerset Police referred the matter to its Professional Standards Department and made a voluntary referral to the Independent Office for Police Conduct. One element concerning the initial viewing of a CCTV clip was later upheld. Throughout the spring and summer of 2024, the possibility of an accidental entry into the water remained on the table. Statistical patterns for missing persons near harbors influenced some early public messaging. The family never accepted that the evidence supported it. Jack had crossed a bridge south of the river and then returned to the northern side. The final cameras showed him walking toward the city, not toward the water's edge. No clothing, bag, or phone was found in or near the harbor, despite the scale of the dive operations. Officers contacted taxi firms and private hire operators who had been in the area between 2:45 and 4 o'clock. Approximately 400 vehicles were estimated to have passed under or near the flyovers in the critical window. Appeals went out for dashcam and doorbell footage. Some material was recovered, none produced a confirmed further sighting of Jack. By the 6-month mark in September 2024, more than 20 different police teams and departments had touched the investigation. The force stated that the inquiry remained live and evidence-led. The family continued to press for fuller disclosure of the phone data and for a wider canvass of the Granby Hill residential streets. As the official search intensity appeared to level, the family turned to external support. Specialist search charities were brought in. A GoFundMe effort raised funds for further private work. By late 2025, an anonymous donor had offered a £100,000 reward for information that could locate Jack. The public Facebook group dedicated to finding him grew past 70,000 members and at peaks approached 100,000. Billboards and posters carrying the simple red text, "Find Jack," appeared across Bristol and North Somerset. The family's daily life became organized around the next appeal, the next possible lead, the next review of old footage. Catherine described the period as a living routine of existence rather than ordinary life. She continued to work as a school matron. Alan continued teaching. Ben kept returning to the streets around the Cumberland Basin. The house in Flax Bourton still had the habits of a home that expected a fourth person to walk through the door. In early 2026, the family engaged Periculum Investigations, a private firm, to conduct an independent review of the circumstances. The investigators completed their work and indicated they would shortly discuss findings and next steps with senior officers. The gap between official and family timelines of activity had become a standing feature of the case. Avon and Somerset Police continued to state that the investigation was live. Assistant Chief Constable Joanne Hall emphasized on the second anniversary that every relevant line of inquiry had been and would continue to be pursued. Specialist expertise and independent agencies had been used to test the work already done. The phone data, the 3-hour window, and the residential location on Granby Hill remained the most concrete, unresolved elements. No third-party involvement had been publicly confirmed. No definitive explanation for the cessation of the phone signal at 6:44 had been released. For the family, the absence of physical recovery after more than 200 hours of water searching and the discovery of the missed CCTV frames created a persistent sense that the first days had set a direction that later evidence complicated. They kept the appeals open. They kept the reward public. They kept walking the same streets. By the spring of 2026, the case had settled into a long investigative rhythm. Periodic public statements, continued technical reviews, private analysis running in parallel, and a family that refused to treat the 3-hour gap as closed. On March 2nd, 2025, 1 year after Jack left the Hotwells party, the family issued a public statement. They said his disappearance remained a complete mystery. Despite private investigators, search and rescue teams, community searches, and forensic IT work, they were still in the dark about that night. Avon and Somerset Police marked the same date with a renewed appeal. Assistant Chief Constable Joanne Hall recognized the continuing impact on the family and stressed that the investigation remained live. The force asked the public to cast their minds back to a cold, snowy night when Bristol City had played Cardiff. By the second anniversary on 2nd March 2026, the pattern had deepened rather than resolved. Catherine O'Sullivan told interviewers that the family no longer lived in any ordinary sense. They existed around the single task of finding answers. The porch light in Flax Bourton was no longer a nightly habit, but the expectation of information had not faded. The Facebook group continued. The billboards continued. The £100,000 reward remained active. An independent review by the College of Policing was under advanced discussion with the force. Private investigators had completed their assessment and were preparing further conversations with senior officers. In July 2026, a new public voice entered the record. Mike Ferguson, A former deputy harbormaster with decades of experience on Bristol's waterways spoke to the BBC. He had written independent reports examining the physical realities of the harbor and the river. Ferguson stated there was no chance whatsoever that Jack had entered the water on the night of March 2, 2024. Bodies in those waterways, he explained, are typically recovered at 7 known catchment points between Avonmouth and Hanham. No body on record had simply been carried out to sea without being found. The statement landed with force because it came from operational experience rather than statistical generalization. The early months of the inquiry had kept the water possibility open. After more than 200 hours of searching and the complete absence of any recovered item, Ferguson's assessment aligned with what the family had argued from the beginning. Police responded that information from third parties, including expert reports, continued to be fed into the inquiry. They maintained an open mind on all scenarios. The public record, however, now contained a clear professional contradiction of the first dominant theory. Throughout 2025 and into 2026, the O'Sullivan family operated a parallel structure of inquiry. They continued to press for fuller access to phone records. They revisited the Granby Hill location with their own devices and noted that the same address continued to register. They maintained contact with specialist search groups for any remaining inaccessible ground near the substation and the steep residential streets. Catherine described the daily discipline as necessary rather than optional. She still worked. Alan still taught. The difference was that every free hour was organized around the next possible lead or the next conversation with investigators. The house no longer waited for a returning son in the same active way. It waited for information that could explain the 3-hour silence. The complaint process and the IOPC involvement had produced limited formal findings. One issue concerning the initial CCTV viewing had been upheld. Most other elements of the early handling were not. The family accepted the outcomes on paper while continuing to believe that critical early opportunities had been narrower than they needed to be. By mid-2026, the private investigation review was complete. The firm indicated it would discuss appropriate next steps with police at a senior level. The gap between official and family timelines had not closed, but it had become a structured, documented feature of the case rather than an unspoken tension. As of July 2026, Jack O'Sullivan remains missing. No confirmed sighting after the Bennett Way frames of 3:38 to 3:40 on March 2, 2024 has been verified. The phone's last network activity at 6:44 and the Granby Hill location fix at 5:40 are still the final digital markers. Avon and Somerset Police continue to describe the investigation as live. They state that specialist expertise and independent agencies have been used to review and test the work already undertaken. Anyone with information is asked to contact the force on 101, quoting reference 5224-055172, or to use the online appeals form. The family keeps the public appeals open. The reward remains. The Facebook group and the physical posters continue to carry the simple request, "Find Jack." Catherine has said her aim on this earth is to find her son. That statement has not changed with the passage of 2 years and 4 months. The 3-hour window between the last camera and the last phone signal has not been filled with any verified sequence of events. The residential streets of Granby Hill and the surrounding Hotwells area still contain the unanswered space that began on a cold March morning in 2024. Jack O'Sullivan was a 22-year-old law student who left a house party, texted his mother that he was coming home, and was recorded walking a Bristol slip road at 3:40. 3 hours later, his phone went silent. No further confirmed trace has been found. The investigation continues. The family continues. The public record now includes both the scale of the official searches and the independent assessment that the water did not take him. What remains is the same open question that closed the first day of the inquiry. If you were in the area of Brunel Way, Bennett Way, the Plimsoll Bridge, or Granby Hill between 2:45 and 7 o'clock on the morning of 2nd March 2024, or if you hold any information, however small, the request is the same as it has been for more than 2 years. Contact the police. The reference number is 5224-055172. Jack O'Sullivan is still missing. The 3-hour gap is still empty. The search is still open.